All right, so now we're moving on from puberty to talk about some other health issues that are occurring during adolescence. One of them has to do with just overall nutrition. So during adolescence, the nutritional requirements increase. So as you have all these growth spurts going on and these sexual changes, your body really needs intake of calories and nutrition. However, poor diets are very common in adolescence. It's during this time period that people are the most likely to engage in some kind of unhealthy diet behaviors. So for example, teenagers are really likely to skip breakfast. That may be partially due to some of the issues we talked about earlier with like the sleep cycle and trying to rush to get ready for school. You might wake up late and just not have time to eat breakfast. It's been shown that skipping breakfast, particularly in adolescence, is actually associated with weight gain and obesity. Likely because if you skip breakfast and then you're like starving for lunchtime, you may be more likely to overeat. Adolescents are also very likely to eat at fast food restaurants, more likely than some other age groups. They also tend to consume a lot more empty calories than people at other ages. So, basically junk food that has high calories but not really any nutritional component to it. Because of that, iron and other vitamin and mineral deficiencies are particularly common during the teenage years. Iron requirements increase during this time, particularly for girls. So girls tend to lose iron during each menstruation. And so if they're not getting adequate iron to replenish that, then they can have anemia and other iron deficiencies. And those can actually contribute to things like poor moods, anxiety, depression, some of the other issues we talked about. It's been shown that having family meals, so eating dinner together, we talked about the benefits of that, like helping with adjustment and things, but it also has been shown that family diets tend to be associated with a healthier diet. So if you're eating dinner at the dinner table every day, then you're more likely to be getting the nutrition that you need in adolescence. It's also during adolescence that eating disorders are most likely to develop. All of these eating disorders that I'll discuss are much more prominent in girls than they are in boys, although there are obviously some boys who suffer from eating disorders as well. Some of the risk factors that contribute to the likelihood that a girl in particular will develop an eating disorder, girls who reach puberty early, those sort of early matures, are more likely to have an eating disorder. If they grow up in a home where there's a real focus on weight and thinness, so if their parents are consistently pushing for that, pointing out their weight, making it sound like their weight is of value, then they're more likely to have eating disorders. And obviously if they have overall body dissatisfaction and they engage in really severe diets, then those are strong predictors that they may develop an eating disorder. The three main eating disorders are anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. In anorexia nervosa, that's essentially where the person is basically starving themselves out of a fear of being overweight or gaining weight. So they may engage in really extreme practices, basically fasting. They may also engage in really excessive exercise to try to lose a really large amount of weight. Typically someone who has anorexia will lose about 25 to 50% of their overall body weight. And it can be very difficult to treat because most people with anorexia are basically in denial that they have it. So they tend to have a really, really distorted body image to where even after they've lost that 25 to 50% of their weight, they tend to see themselves as being overweight and bigger than they actually are. And so the cycle just kind of continues. Can lead to really severe malnutrition, which can cause all kinds of physical issues, and in really extreme cases can actually result in death from starvation and malnourishment. In addition to that, it can also impact the menstrual cycle. So because their body fat is so low and they're iron deficient in a lot of cases, they may have delayed puberty, or they may start puberty, but then once they begin this eating disorder, then their menstrual cycle may basically stop. Some of the things that contribute to anorexia, there is actually a genetic component. It's been shown to run in families and be more likely across twins. And that may be due to some biological abnormalities in neurotransmitters that basically lead to the eating disorder. Parenting style is another one, like I talked about. And also people who tend to have really unrealistic, like perfectionistic standards for themselves are more likely to develop anorexia. Bulimia nervosa is an eating disorder in which the person engages in binge eating, so they'll eat a really large quantity of food, but then they'll engage in compensatory behaviors, so they try to basically get rid of that food in some way. That could be vomiting, it could be things like taking laxatives, or maybe engaging in really excessive exercise in order to try to make up for the binging that they just engaged in. Bulimia is more common than anorexia nervosa. And it is affected by some of the same things, so things like heredity. It has been shown to run in family. Typically, for this one, the early puberty is a larger impact on bulimia than it is on anorexia. And then the third eating disorder is binge eating disorder, which is, again, where someone's engaging in the binge eating, but they're not following it up with those purging behaviors that you have in bulimia. So they engage in eating large quantities of food. In order for someone to be diagnosed with binge eating disorder, though, they have to binge at least once a week for 3 months for it to be considered a disorder. So probably all of us have engaged in binge eating at some point or another. It's Thanksgiving or something like that. You eat a lot. But someone who has the actual disorder engages in that behavior on a regular basis. Like I said, these are much more common in girls than boys. So with anorexia, for example, only about 10 to 15% of the cases of anorexia are boys, whereas the other 85 to 90% are girls, probably because girls tend to place a lot more emphasis on their body image, and thinness is something that is valued in our society in girls, whereas not so much in boys. So those are probably some of the contributing factors to that difference.